Something happened this morning that no scientist alive has a framework to explain. At exactly 4:15 UTC in March 2026, the planet changed, not metaphorically, not gradually. It changed in 12 minutes flat, and the data coming in from 3 independent space agencies is so extreme, so far outside the boundaries of known physics, that the researchers analyzing it are struggling to find the words. Global sea levels rose by 6 inches in a single day, not a millimeter, not a centimeter. 6 full inches, and that number should stop you cold, because to displace that volume of water across the entire surface of the Earth's oceans requires melting roughly 50,000 cubic kilometers of ice almost instantly. To put that in terms you can actually picture, imagine the entire state of Florida liquefying and pouring into the Atlantic Ocean in less than 24 hours. NASA's Jason-3 satellite confirmed it. The European Sentinel-6 confirmed it independently. And what both agencies are quietly agreeing on is the part that changes everything. This was not climate change. This was not a natural collapse. The source was 3I Atlas. For those just joining this story, 3I Atlas is the deep space object that has been holding a geostationary position directly above the Weddell Sea in Antarctica for the past 3 months. At 4:15 UTC this morning, the Deep Space Network tracked a coherent energy spike originating from that object, a directed pulse of thermal energy so precise and so violent that it flash liquefied a massive section of the Thwaites Glacier shelf in just over 10 minutes. To understand what that looked like in real time, pull up the satellite thermal imaging from the Landsat 9 sensor. Antarctica is normally a deep, unbroken sheet of blue and white, holding steady at -30 degrees Celsius. For 12 minutes this morning, those sensors maxed out entirely. They recorded a surface temperature spike of 800 degrees Celsius on the ice. That is the melting point of aluminum, achieved on a glacier in the middle of the Antarctic winter. When the raw data first came through from the National Snow and Ice Data Center, the initial assumption was sensor error, calibration failure, equipment malfunction. That assumption lasted exactly as long as it took to check the tidal gauges. Tokyo, New York, Amsterdam. The water is rising. The physics of what happened this morning implies an energy source that humanity cannot replicate, cannot approach, and frankly, cannot comprehend. We are talking about petawatts of directed energy, focused into a beam less than 3 kilometers wide, fired from orbit with the surgical precision of a scalpel. Something reached down from space and removed a continent's worth of ice from the planet's surface in the time it takes to watch a short video. And then it stopped. Exactly 12 minutes after the beam began, 3I Atlas switched it off. That single detail, that deliberate, controlled termination, is the most disturbing piece of data we have, because it implies this was not an accident, it was not a malfunction, it was a test. And if what we witnessed this morning was only a test, the real question tearing through every research lab and government agency right now is simple and terrifying. What happens when it decides to finish? To truly grasp what occurred above the Weddell Sea this morning, you have to follow the data through 3 separate and completely independent sources, because in science, a single reading proves nothing. What we have today is not a single reading. We have 3 agencies, 3 different technologies, and 3 identical conclusions, pointing at something that has no natural explanation. NASA's ESA CryoSat-2 satellite, which uses the Atlas laser altimeter system, was passing directly over the eastern shelf at the moment of the event. This instrument measures ice surface height to within 4 millimeters per pass. In a single 90-second window, it recorded the ice surface dropping vertically by 400 meters. Read that again. 400 meters of ice surface elevation, gone in 90 seconds. Ice does not compress. It does not evaporate under normal conditions. For the surface to fall that far that fast, the solid matter beneath it had to cease being solid. It transitioned from ice to liquid water, not over hours or days, but essentially instantaneously, and that requires a sudden thermal injection that shatters every model of natural thermodynamics we have ever built. Then came the corroboration. The European Space Agency's CryoSat-2, using synthetic aperture radar, detected a massive plume of superheated water vapor climbing into the stratosphere at the exact coordinates 75 degrees south, 40 degrees west, Simultaneously, Japan's ALOS-4 satellite used its pulsar radar to see through the steam cloud and image the surface below. What JAXA scientists found when they processed that imagery stopped the room. In the middle of the Antarctic ice shelf, where solid ice had existed for millennia, there was now open water. Not a jagged, irregular melt zone, the way nature produces when ice breaks apart organically. A circle. A geometrically perfect circle with a diameter of exactly 88 kilometers. 3 agencies, 3 methodologies. 1 conclusion. Nature does not draw perfect circles. Nature does not heat Antarctic water to 90 degrees Celsius in the middle of winter. What you are looking at in that radar image is deliberate geometry, and deliberate geometry implies deliberate intent. Now consider the energy required to produce this. To take 50,000 gigatons of ice from minus 20 degrees Celsius to liquid water requires approximately the energy equivalent of detonating 3 million Hiroshima-scale nuclear devices simultaneously, focused on a single point. If every nuclear warhead on Earth, every American, Russian, Chinese, French, and British weapon combined, were detonated together on the Antarctic ice sheet, the result would be a radioactive crater. It would not liquefy a continent. What 3I Atlas discharged in 12 minutes represents an energy output comparable to the total consumption of the entire human civilization across the next 400 years. But here is where the physics stops making sense entirely. That much energy should have done something else. It should have ignited the atmosphere. The air above the melt zone should have turned to plasma. The ozone layer should have been vaporized on contact. According to the atmospheric sensors aboard the NOAA 20 satellite, the air temperature above the event zone rose by exactly 2 degrees Celsius. The ice melted, the water boiled, the air stayed cold. That is not a measurement error. That is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics, and it points toward a technology so far beyond our own that the most serious physicists working this data right now are only able to describe it in theoretical terms. What you cannot heat ice without heating the surrounding air tells us is that 3I Atlas is almost certainly not using thermal radiation at all. A laser heats what it touches and radiates energy outward. Microwaves penetrate and warm from within, but still bleed heat into the environment. What happened above the Weddell Sea this morning left the atmosphere untouched, while instantly converting solid matter to liquid. And there is only one theoretical framework that explains that outcome: phase transition engineering, the manipulation of matter at the quantum level, specifically the disruption of the molecular forces that give ice its structure. Water molecules in a solid state are locked together by van der Waals forces, electromagnetic bonds that hold them in a rigid, crystalline lattice. If a technology exists that can selectively switch off those bonds without introducing kinetic energy into the surrounding medium, the ice does not melt. It simply stops being solid. It loses structural integrity at the atomic level and becomes liquid without generating any waste heat in the air above it. On the Kardashev scale, the framework physicists use to rank civilizations by energy use, this is a Type 2 capability. We have theorized about it. We have written the equations. We have never, until this morning, seen it applied to a physical object on our own planet. The implications cascade outward fast. If 3I Atlas can alter the phase state of matter without thermal bleed, it has effective control over the physical state of anything on Earth's surface. Ice, rock, water, atmosphere, the same principle applies to all of them. A mountain range could become a fluid. The oceanic crust could be liquefied. The precision demonstrated this morning, that perfect 8-kilometer circle, makes this even more unsettling because precision at that scale is not accidental. That number, 88 kilometers, has appeared before. It matches the orbital resonance calculations researchers have been running on the object for months. It is a mathematical signature embedded in the geometry of the event itself. Then at 12:42 UTC, the story shifted completely. For the first 8 hours after the melt, the working assumption was straightforward. Energy came from above. The object fired down, the ice responded. Clean, linear, explicable in at least theoretical terms. But the USGS monitoring station in Albuquerque picked up a coherent P wave at 12:42, a seismic signal originating not from the crust, not from a fault line, but from the Earth's outer core. The epicenter was directly beneath the Antarctic melt zone. The energy that destroyed that ice shelf did not only come from space. Something deep inside the planet answered, and the answer was not random noise. It was structured. It contained a repeating pulse pattern transmitted at exactly 88 Hz, the same frequency at which the original beam struck the surface. 3 short bursts, 3 long bursts, 3 short bursts. In binary, that reads 101110101, which converts to the number 565, which maps to atomic numbers 5, 6, and 5 boron, carbon, boron. The James Webb Space Telescope confirmed the presence of exotic carbon structures on 3I Atlas's surface last week. The Earth's core just transmitted the chemical signature of the object back to it. This was not destruction, this was a handshake. A handshake between a foreign object in orbit and the liquid iron core of our own planet is a sentence that should not exist in any scientific report. And yet, that is precisely what the data describes. 3. Atlas sent a signal down. The Earth responded with a structured, chemically encoded reply at the same frequency. Call it synchronization, call it active resonance. The physical analogy is a tuning fork. Strike one, and the other vibrates in sympathy across the room. The object struck the Antarctic shelf at 88 Hz, and at 1242 UTC, the planet's core rang back. What followed that handshake is already being felt. The magnetic field around the South Pole weakened by 4% within hours of the signal exchange. Ships in the Southern Ocean are reporting compass anomalies. The aurora australis became visible in broad daylight over New Zealand. The Swarm satellite constellation, which monitors Earth's magnetic field lines in real time, is detecting a tangling of field lines directly beneath the melt zone. When magnetic field lines knot and then snap, they do not release energy quietly. They produce electromagnetic pulses. An interior pulse of sufficient magnitude would disable every satellite in low Earth orbit and collapse the power infrastructure of the entire southern hemisphere in minutes. And 3. Atlas is watching it develop. At 13 UTC, the object repositioned its orbit to align precisely with the magnetic South Pole. It is not moving away. It is moving into position as though preparing to receive the energy that the destabilized field is about to release. The pattern here, if you step back far enough to see it whole, resembles something deeply familiar. A cosmic organism identifying a host, initiating contact, triggering a biological response, and then positioning itself to feed on what the response produces. The ice melt was not the event. The ice melt was the opening move. The core signal was the answer, and the magnetic destabilization is what comes next. Now let us establish what is confirmed beyond dispute. 3. Atlas liquefied 50,000 cubic kilometers of ice in 12 minutes. The resulting water carries an ultraviolet fluorescence signature that has no known natural equivalent. Local gravity in the 88 kilometer melt circle dropped by 0.004% during the phase transition, meaning measurable mass disappeared during the process. The Earth's core responded at 1242 UTC with a structured binary signal encoding the atomic composition of the object itself. These observations come from NASA, ESA, and JAXA. They are not theories, they are instrument readings. But one question cuts through everything else. Why did the signal stop? At 13:15 UTC, 33 minutes after the core responded, 3 Atlas went silent. The beam terminated. The thermal signature vanished. The magnetic fluctuation stabilized temporarily. There are 3 possible explanations, and which one is correct determines the future of this planet. First possibility: the handshake was completed successfully. Synchronization is done, the process has started, and the silence is the calm before something far larger. Second possibility: the object finished what it came for, harvested the energy or material it needed, and will leave orbit. We survive with 6 inches of extra ocean and a story no one will fully believe. Third possibility, and this is the one that should keep every person watching this awake tonight, it is waiting. Not for the core, for us. This entire event, the precision, the geometry, the controlled demonstration of planetary scale power, may be exactly what it appears to be. A message: look what I can do. Look how little effort this required. Look how easily your poles melt and your compasses spin. And right now, at 14 UTC, 3I Atlas has rotated. It is no longer facing Antarctica. Its primary face has turned north. It is looking at the Arctic, at the Greenland ice sheet. If it repeats this process in the northern hemisphere, the sea level rise will not be 6 inches. Conservative models put it at 20 feet. That drowns London. That erases Miami. That ends the coastal civilization that houses the majority of the human population. The Sentinel-6 satellite is tracking the glowing water mass as it moves north through the Atlantic. It has crossed the 60th parallel. In roughly 48 hours, it will reach the Gulf Stream, the engine that regulates the climate of the entire northern hemisphere, and whatever that charged, UV fluorescing, anomalously viscous water does when it hits that current. Our models cannot predict it reliably because we have never had data like this before. The instruments are running, the telescopes are locked on, the object is in position, and you now know everything the data shows. If this video reached you, share it. The more people who understand what is actually happening right now, the harder it becomes to quietly manage this story into silence. Subscribe if you want to follow this in real time, because the 4-8-hour window has already started. And whatever 3i Atlas does next, you deserve to see it the moment the data comes in.